Are we waiting on me? Are we waiting on me to start this, or who is doing this?
Well, I'd be happy to start this off.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is just a little bit of the background. If any of you are joining us for the first time, this is the mission of PCCEP. PCCEP stands for the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. It is, I won't read the whole mission statement because it's right there on everybody's screen, so you can all see it. But if you'd like me to, I can, but I don't see any hands raised or thumbs up, so I won't. And then we're just gonna go over a couple of housekeeping things, and then we're just gonna jump right in. So this will just take a couple of minutes. These are the PCCEP group values. Sometimes we go through and read them all. Sometimes we'll have a PCCEP member go through and read them all, but you can see them all right there. And we ask that you all please operate within these parameters. People are here with good intentions, and people are here trying to make our community a better place and a more equitable place. And that's why we continue to, that's why PCCEP as a committee continues to do this work and work super, super, super hard and diligently every day. So please keep your sound off unless you're talking. If you are able, keep your video off as well unless you're talking, unless you're a PCCEP member. So PCCEP members can be centered on everybody's screen. In the participant box, you can use the raise hand feature when you're asking a question or if you have a comment. When community comments, when that happens, or city comment will go in the order of PCCEP member comments, community comment, and then city staff comments. So it'll be 1, 2, 3. And the co-chairs will they'll say out loud when it's time for each of those. In case of Zoom bombing, we'll do our best. Claudia, Judith, and I will do our best to stop it as soon as it happens. We've gotten okay at identifying it, but it's a learning curve for all of us. But we will immediately remove disrespectful speech, white supremacist speech, any kind of speech that's detrimental to forwarding this group and the community, the voice of the community. Not all meetings are recorded, but this general body meeting is recorded all the time, and it's posted via YouTube. And Open Signal is working with us today to do that. If you have any questions, you can contact me. That's my direct email there. Theo Lada is my name. Or you can email the PCCEP info at portlandoregon.gov. If you have a recommendation for the committee, they will all go directly to the committee. So yeah, please feel free to speak up. Please feel free to view this as a space where you can share your mind respectfully, and I thank you for being here. And yeah, one of the co-chairs, take it away.
Thanks, Theo. This is Lakiana, one of our 2 co-chairs of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. I want to welcome you all to our June meeting. For the familiar faces, it's great to see you again. For the new folks, welcome. Really happy to have you here. We're going to do introductions of all of our members. So when I call your names, you just want to introduce yourself, your pronouns, and any committees that you're on in PCCEP. And we will start with Andrew.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Andrew Kallick. I'm co-chair along with Lakiana and chair of the subcommittee on the settlement agreement and policy. Good to be here. Thanks.
In your pronouns too, please.
He, him, his pronouns.
Thank you. Vadim.
Hi, everybody. Vadim Mazursky, Secretary of PCCEP, and I'm also on the settlement and policy agreement, and policy subcommittee, as well as the behavioral health subcommittee.
Thank you, Vadim. Elliot.
I am Elliot Young. I'm a alternate co-chair on the steering committee and on the race and equity subcommittee. Welcome, everybody.
Marcia?
Good evening, everyone. It's Marcia Perez, and I'm the chair of the Racial Equity Subcommittee, and I have she, her pronouns.
Thank you. Taji?
Hello everyone, Taji Chestnut. I am on the youth subcommittee and I use he, him pronouns. Thank you.
Yolanda?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Yolanda Salguero, and my pronouns are she and hers, and I'm on the youth subcommittee as a co-chair. Thank you.
Amy?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Anderson, and I am the chair of the Behavioral Health Subcommittee, and welcome everyone to our meeting.
And what pronouns do you use?
I just use Amy.
Andre?
Hi, I'm Andre LaRoche, he, him, and I sit on the Behavioral Health Subcommittee.
And last but not least, Ann.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Campbell. I am on the Behavioral Health Subcommittee, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank
I'll just
you.
jump in here if I can.
Oh yeah, of course, Britt, go ahead.
Last but not least times two. Hey everyone, Britt, he, him pronouns, and I serve with Taji and Yolanda on the youth subcommittee.
Thanks, Britt. We're going to start this meeting as we have the whole month of June by centering Black people in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and our continued struggle to recognize race and recognize every individual in our country. So I'm going to read off a list of individuals who have died in Portland at the hands of police, as well as some individuals around our country, and then we'll take a 30-second moment of silence. Andre Gladden, Patrick Kimmons, Ernest Hayes, Kendra James, Alberta Tate, Keaton Otis, Lloyd Toney, DeAndre Keller, Aaron Campbell, Rayshard Brooks, Robert Fuller, Breonna Taylor, Rhea Milton, and Dominique Fells, among obviously an unfortunate list of individuals that we could probably add to if we would like. We'll take a 30-second moment of silence. Thank you for that. Our committee has been working incredibly hard this month. This is actually the 9th meeting, I believe, of our committee, including our 4 subcommittees, our steering committee, and then 3 special sessions that we held on Sundays to capture the voices of community members and listen to their experiences. And we had over 700 people attend those meetings between those 3 sessions. So we want to thank everybody who's attended, who's participated, who shared their experience. The city's going through tremendous change right now. The Bureau's going through tremendous change. Families will be sending their kids back to schools this fall that will not have police officers in them. Journalists continue to risk their lives on the streets to record and share what is happening with the marches. We are looking at how does the Bureau interact with persons with perceived or actual mental health? What is the changes that are going to be made to houseless individuals which for a long time have made up over half of the arrests in Portland. How do we support the new police chief, Chief Lavelle, who's on the call, and his work in reframing and reimagining what the police bureau looks like? And then our work internally as PCCEP too. How do we continue to lift up voices on our committee that are not present, such as the LGBTQ plus community? How do we uplift women on our committee, especially Black women, as was mentioned in a previous call, Indigenous women, women of color? I'm proud to say we have 4 women on our committee currently. Amy, who co-chairs the Behavioral Health Subcommittee, Yolanda, who co-chairs the Youth Subcommittee, Marcia, who co-chairs or who chairs the Racial Equity Subcommittee, and Anne, who just joined our committee as well. We're missing Black women on this committee. We had a Black woman at one point, and so that's something that we are going to be looking to do and have already taken steps of. So just wanted to give an overview of some of those pieces and what PCCEP is working on and working towards to make sure that we're representing our community and being that bridge. We're going to jump into our subcommittee reports. So I will start with Taji and Yolanda. Sorry, I just got a message that came in. Taji and Yolanda to start with our youth subcommittee.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. We have been hard at work on our restorative justice recommendation for the past month and a half or so, getting an extensive amount of community input on that. We held a forum on the 11th of June where we had young people give their perspectives, and we had some really great stories and thoughts about our recommendation. And thankfully, we'll be talking about it and voting on it tonight. So really excited to see that move forward. In addition, for transparency's sake and just so everyone's aware of what's happening, hopefully if the recommendation passes, we'll be meeting with the mayor on Friday and meeting with the district attorney-elect on Thursday. You can also see the recommendation if you're interested on the website, portlandoregon.gov/PCCEP. And moving forward, we're excited to work with the city leaders to get that implemented and look at other recommendations that we heard from our forum to move forward into the summer and into the new school year with. So Britt or Yolanda can add anything.
Just to add, because usually this gets lost at the end of the meeting, our next full regular subcommittee meeting is on July 6th at, I believe, 4 p.m. So please come out or please join us online for that as well.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is our meeting ends at 5:15, so we try to keep it pretty succinct for everyone. We know your time is valuable. Thank you.
Thank you all for the incredible work. Next, we will go with the Behavioral Health Subcommittee and Amy. Amy, you there? We'll go to the Racial Equity Subcommittee with Marcia then.
Hey everyone, we last met on Thursday, June 18th, and we typically meet the third Thursday of every month. The focus of last week's meeting was to center specifically Black women and hold space for Black women to speak up and talk about recommendations and their experiences and how PCCEP can elevate their voices in this work. I thought it went really, really well. We had some really great recommendations that came out of that. We want to continue to reach out to key nonprofit organizations, and I think that we will continue to lead. We had a lot of feedback that was really positive, and we will continue to lead that group, being driven by the voices of Black women specifically. So please spread the word. I do know that we want to also publicly endorse the local organizations that have done have been leading the work of police reform, like Unite Oregon, the Portland African American Leadership Forum, Urban League, and the Portland United Against Hate. So we're working towards some additional listening sessions and working with the AMAC on that. So if folks want to get involved, please feel free to contact me. We will be meeting again on I think it's the 16th of July, which is the third Thursday. Among the several recommendations, Elliot will be presenting tonight a recommendation for arbitration, and so to endorse the Senator Lou Frederick's recommendation for arbitration. So we will talk about that later this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marcia. Next, let's go to Amy. Are you there? We wanted to do the.
I'm here. I was doing something in the computer and lost the screen.
No, it's okay.
Basically, we had a change in schedule. We did not have the BHU unit, so I invited Taj to come in and talk about his recommendation, and he gave us some heads up on the work that he's doing in the subcommittee, and that was really good. And we also had some of the folks from the BHU Behavioral Health Unit come in. They were there and able to the Behavioral Health Advisory Council, and they were able to give us some insight on some of the work they did. And this coming meeting, we're gonna have a couple of presentations. So we're working towards more work around mental illness and how it impacts people of color, and learning more about how the Behavioral Health Unit actually works within our community. So it's all about education and information. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Awesome work. I'll turn it over to Andrew and the Settlement Agreement and Policy Subcommittee.
We had a very substantive meeting this month about 3 recommendations that we'll talk about tonight. One on accelerating a Truth and Reconciliation Commission model, one on the duty to intervene and training to support it, and one on amending the foot pursuit directive. We also spoke about a number of the directives currently up for review by the Portland Police Bureau at our monthly meeting. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts and your comments on the recommendations that we put forward later. Thank you.
Awesome. And I'll wrap us up by talking about the steering committee. We discussed the proposals, a lot of them that will be voted on tonight, and trying to organize and prioritize those. One of the challenges for those of you who are new to PCCEP, especially in our condensed format. So this meeting is going to go hopefully from 5:30 to 7:30, I want to say. Let me just make sure it's right. Yeah, 7:30. So it's about an hour shorter than our meetings in person. And even in our in-person meetings, right, when we have recommendations that come to the floor, there has to be public comment and PCCEP comment. So there's not always a ton of time to get through all recommendations and make sure that they're heard and processed. And especially at times like now where there's critical votes happening and things are moving very rapidly. There's just been a lot of dialogue about how do we give people time to share the recommendations, process them, and which ones do we have to prioritize, along with all the other things that we have to do. So we looked a lot at that. And then also heard from Amy on updates on the Behavioral Health Subcommittee. That subcommittee kind of reformed itself from a couple months back. And so just getting an update on what the work that they've been doing, which sounds tremendous. As I mentioned earlier, PCCEP has been doing special Sunday sessions. We didn't do one this past Sunday, but for the previous 3 Sundays, we had listening sessions. And so at that steering committee meeting, we had made a decision to continue for a 3rd session, which was very productive. And then we also crafted the agenda, as we always do during those steering committee meetings, for this meeting tonight. So that's an update on that. Andrew, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Nope, that's right. Yep, thank
Cool.
you.
And I will turn it over to you for the next piece of the meeting.
Great, thanks. So this segment is PPB updates on the agenda. I know that we have several folks on who can speak to what the city or the Bureau have done in reference to some of the recommendations that we have passed recently. Just to remind folks who haven't been with us before, when PCCEP passes a recommendation, we submit it to the Police Bureau and to the Mayor's office. the PCCEP plan suggests 60 days for a response from the city. And so I invite anybody who's here from City Hall, if they want to chime in on some of the recent recommendations that we've been passed, if you have taken action, if you are currently reviewing them, to give both the committee and the community a sense of where things stand. And I'm not sure if there's someone who wants to speak to this or not, but let me know.
Andrew, it's Robert King from the
Thank
Mayor's
you.
Office.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to thank everyone on the committee for the most recent recommendation that we received and that was directed to the mayor with respect to revising or removing qualified immunity. And I want you to know the mayor is in receipt of that. He is in support of that. We're in the process of obtaining signatures and getting that document back to you as a committee. On June the 9th, he announced a list of a variety of different reforms and accountability measures that he's in the process of implementing. And he actually had carved out the qualified immunity issue at that press conference and in that press release. So he is in agreement with you as a committee. He's grateful and appreciative of your work with respect to that particular point. He will be working very closely with government relations, and it will be a conversation that we'll be engaged in with the Oregon delegation in the coming days. So just wanted to affirm the work that PCCEP did. Thank you for the recommendation. Let you know the boss is in complete agreement with you. And then I also just wanted to take a quick moment, less than a minute, just to say, of course, Andrew and Steve, I know both of you, this will probably be talked a little bit about later in the meeting, but are both resigning your post, Andrew, because you're moving on to Eugene, and Steve, because of demands on work and family, and on behalf of the mayor. He just is genuinely grateful, for all of your energy and effort and work that you have done on behalf of community, especially during this difficult time, to bring PCCEP into full function for all the work that is going to happen in the coming days and the coming weeks with community. So just genuinely grateful to everybody on the committee, but especially both of you for your volunteer service. It has had a tremendous impact. The folks coming after you will have benefited greatly, both from your heart and from your work. And Mayor wanted me just to pass on to you his deepest gratitude for all the work you did on behalf of our community.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask you, Robert, there's a request from the public member to introduce yourself. And I wanted to also ask you about the two recommendations that we passed a couple of weeks ago, one on redirecting funds from Portland Police Bureau and the other one on a ban on chemical weapons, whether you're in receipt of that and whether there is a response from the city. Thank you.
Happy to. Thanks very much, Elliot. Yeah, apologize to everybody. My name is Robert King. I am the Senior Policy Advisor to Mayor Wheeler with respect to public safety. And as you mentioned, we do have the redirect of the funding and as well as the ban on the munitions. We have both of those. The Police Bureau and Mayor is in receipt of them. And they're among the things that are being discussed at this time. I'm sorry I don't have a better update on those two particular items at this time, but Mayor and our team are in the process of discussing them. And I know that with Chief Lavelle coming on just recently that he's also being brought up to speed in that conversation as well, Elliot.
Thank you very much, Robert. And we'll look forward to another update on those recommendations and any other recommendations at next month's full board meeting. I understand that we have the new chief on the line. Thank you so much, Chief, for joining us. You've been part of PCCEP from the beginning. We thank you for your past support, and we congratulate you on your new role. And the floor is yours if you want to share a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Good to see you virtually again. I'm not going to take up too much time, and I apologize in advance. I'm going to have to jump off at 6:30 for another appointment. But I just wanted to come and say hi, introduce myself, see all of you again. And most of you I've worked with on PCCEP for a little while now. So I'm no stranger to PCCEP. I'm on day 12 as the new chief of Portland Police. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the work that PCCEP has put in throughout the last couple of years. I know I got to spend a lot of time with PCCEP, with my time with Chief Outlaw, and then my time with the Community Services Division. I think this is a transformative time in police work. I think change is upon us all as it comes to policing and police reform, and it's incumbent on us kind of cooperatively and collaboratively to figure out what the next steps look like. And I'm hoping we can put together some steps that really make better outcomes for people in the future. I want to really be mindful of the things that we do now in this time of change to ensure that they're well thought out and they're going to be positive, lasting change and bring us closer, especially to communities of color. So I look forward to continuing to collaboratively work with PCCEP, and I'm sure we'll be in touch a lot. And it's good to see you all again. And I look forward to the journey. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate your leadership. At this time, I want to open it to PCCEP members to see if you have any comments or further questions, either for Mr. King or Chief Lavelle. So feel free to raise your hand using the raise your hand function, or just raise your hand like this and I'll try to identify you. Lakiana, then Elliot, yes.
I was just wondering if we can have space, if it's possible for, since we do have the chief on, I think this would be an opportunity for the community to ask a couple questions. I don't know if the chief's prepared to answer them, but I think anytime we have a platform like this, that's what I would like to see it used for.
Yep, we're going PCCEP and then community. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Elliot.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Lavelle, for participating and for in the past and right now. I wanted to ask you about the current policy on use of chemical weapons in the course of protests. I know that there was a court case and there was a temporary limited use ban on it. And so it's not clear to me where it stands, because it seems subsequent to that court decision that chemical agents have been used. So if you could sort of tell us what the current policy is.
Yeah, currently we have use of it in life safety type situations. Situations where people's safety is in danger, or people's lives are potentially be in danger, then we have the ability to use it in those situations. For us, it's a tool. It's a tool that helps us disperse unlawful assemblies. And it's a tool that allows us to not have to use sticks or, force direct face-to-face, and that force is more likely to have lasting kind of injuries or impacts. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I think there is still some stuff pending with the temporary restraining order on it. It's a big topic, and it's one that we talk about a lot. But yeah, that's kind of where it sits right now, Elliot.
Just one clarification, life safety situations, could you give us like a couple of examples of what those have included?
Yeah, I think there's been some situations where we have the Justice Center downtown fenced off, and people try to climb the fence and breach that fence and go over onto the portico outside the building. There was an incident when these demonstrations first started where people actually broke into the bottom floor of the Justice Center and tried to set fires and things of that nature, endangering people that are in the jail inside. So it's just situations like that. It's not used on just crowds or peaceful demonstrators or anything like that. It's just life safety situations.
Thank you, Chief. Any additional PCCEP questions or comments before turning to the public? Britt?
Yep. Logistical question from the youth committee. You're very busy right now, so no worries not getting back to us about this, but we have this event on Friday where we're presenting our restorative justice recommendation, and obviously the police bureau is a big stakeholder in that. Excuse me. And I was just wondering if we could, probably maybe not yourself, but either you or someone from your office could be there. That would just be helpful for us so we can start the dialogue right away on getting that going. It's Friday at 3 p.m.
All right. Is it a Zoom call?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah. Send me an email, and I will. I'll see if we can get someone on there.
Okay. Thank you.
The invite is in your inbox, Chief Lavelle.
Thanks, Theo.
Yeah.
You want me just to follow up on that?
No, if it's in my inbox, I'll work on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Good to see you, Britt.
Likewise.
Any more PCCEP members? Okay. Open floor for others on the call. And again, if you can, please use the raise your hand function. It's under participants. If you click on participants, you'll be able to raise your hand. Barb, I see you have your hand raised, so please, the floor is yours.
Because otherwise I don't have your screen. The audio will bounce back and forth.
Right.
Okay.
You gotta lean into the camera.
All right,
You
I'll
want the
move.
camera.
Hold on, people. Hi there, everyone. I'm excited that we have a new chief, and I've missed you, Mr. King. I don't know what the right. But I'm gonna ask a hard question now, and I certainly don't expect an answer. But as far as building trust with the community, during the first couple of days of the protests, there's news footage of 2 Portland police cars seemingly going into a crowd. And I'm hoping that through PCCEP, we can learn and understand how and why that happened and try and prevent similar things.
And your question being?
My question is asking them to get back to us.
Okay.
And not let that slip through the cracks, because that was under the old chief, for example.
Got it. Thank you, Barb. Other community members, questions for the chief, Mr. King?
I really didn't want to be first.
Portland Cop Watch, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, hi, Chief Lavelle. It's Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch, and we've met you several times over the years. I just want to put forward to both the chief and to the committee that if we're trying to bridge the gap between the community and the police, that when language is used like chemical weapons are a tool, that's very much not how people who are on the receiving end of it see it. It's a weapon that harms them. And then when it's said that it's only used on people who are presumably causing a life-threatening situation, everybody in the area is affected by it. So it is being used to coin a phrase, indiscriminately. There's reports of houseless people who are staying downtown who were affected by it. They weren't even participating in the protest. So I just want to make sure that we are careful about language on both sides, but I hear this a lot from the police where it's kind of minimizing the harms that are being done to the community.
Thank you for that comment, Cop Watch. Chief, I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's never our intention for people to get injured or hurt or affected by any of this stuff. we do our best to give ample warnings to folks before we use any munitions like that to clear the area. We give people every opportunity to vacate the area. And sometimes when you have to employ some of those tools, yeah, that the effects of that does spread. I mean, it's just kind of how it works, but it's definitely not our desire to be doing that. I mean, we took this job not to be standing across, you know, a riot line face to face with community members. We took this job to stand side by side with community and work to make the community better and safer. So, I mean, I understand Dan's point, and it's a fair point, but I think, you know, based on the situations that unfold in front of us, we do our best to try to give folks every opportunity to leave before we use any of that stuff.
Thank you, Chief. Tabidi, I see your hand is raised.
Oh, yes. Hey, thank you. How are you doing? I'm my name is Tabidi Lewis, and I am an alternate of PCCEP. And so in all of my attendance at various meetings, what I want to know is, can we get from you an agreement for a real collaborative community policing planning process? So what I was getting from the representatives that were being sent from the police force was that we should send some recommendations, and then the police force would take a look at it and then get back to us. And this is not collaborative. This is not a collaborative process. A collaborative process is an entity that is, you know, the reason PCCEP exists, sitting with entities that represent the police force, talking about, and I even sent your legal representative examples of community policing models that are effective. There was no response. And in the meetings, there was a resistance to engage in a collaborative fashion. There seems to be, if we don't approach this from an authoritarian, so if the approach from the police force is an authoritarian, we'll take these recommendations under consideration and get back to you, this is not going to be maximizing what I see as an opportunity for Portland to be a leader. So my question to you is, are you and your leadership willing to step away from an authoritarian, we'll take your recommendations under consideration, and sitting with PCCEP and in a workshop collaborative fashion, looking at noted and models and examples, and then looking at Portland and us together coming up with what we see to be an effective and reasonable community policing model, and not just, I send you something, you take it under advisement and say, I'll take A, B, or C. So that is my question I would like you to respond to, please, because you're new now. This is a new opportunity for us.
Yeah, thanks, Tabiti. You know, I think that is a good model. I think that's something we should strive for. There's going to be things that are more difficult to implement than others because they touch other aspects of kind of what we do. But I look forward to a collaborative model and discussions. And, you know, I'm one person, so I'm going to have to rely on a lot of other people, and including PCCEP, to come up with ideas and things that are going to work for the community. So I'm definitely open to having workshops, discussions, collaborative meetings to put things in place. I think we're at a time now where we have to take action. It's great to have meetings, it's great to have kind of plans and ideas, but really it boils down to what steps are we taking to actually implement things that are going to improve the relationship and be better for the community.
Thank you. So a two-pronged process. I'm hearing that from you.
Thank you, Tabidi. Marcia, then Amy.
Yeah, hi, Chief Lavelle. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Sure.
As I
Good
said
to see
in
you,
my,
Marcia.
good to see you. as I said in my intro, last week when I hosted the Racial Equity Subcommittee, I was really intentional about holding space specifically for Black women. As we know, Black women are often they're just not heard, not seen, and significantly undervalued. What I heard was a frustration and fear that things aren't going to get done, that this is just another committee. And I, as the chair of the Racial Equity Subcommittee, I want to be intentional about how I move things forward and uplift the voices of the Black community. And so I'm curious if and how the Bureau is prepared to respond of the needs of or ask of Black women in this community. I think it's a fear of mine of uplifting the voices and not being able to deliver the information that's being provided. And so I'm curious from your perspective, Chief, what we can hope to deliver to the community if we're creating those spaces.
So I'm not sure I understand your question totally.
So if we're creating a platform and asking the community to come forward and tell us what they need from law enforcement, from the community, from Portland Police, from the mayor's office, and asking to reallocate funds to other organizations, and Black women are stepping up and telling us what they think that they need or what they do need, because they would know best on what their needs are. How is the Bureau prepared to listen and to learn from their experiences and respond to those experiences? And are they prepared?
I'm happy to have those conversations or host those conversations, listen to those voices, because those are the voices we need. I think it's great work that you're doing. And, I have a sister and a mom who are, Black women, and I want their voices heard. I want them to be represented in spaces where typically they haven't been. And I think that's an important voice that sometimes does get overlooked. I would agree with that too. I know in our agency too, we would love to have more Black women working in policing and hear that voice and kind of know what's important to them. So I'm definitely open to that discussion, and however I can be of assistance to the work you're doing, I'm happy to do it.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Chief. Amy?
Yeah, my question has to do with fiscal situations. A lot of ideas and recommendations I know take money. And would it be best if PCCEP had a recommendation and then we actually did a fiscal analysis on its feasibility? Would that make it have more power? If we actually looked at how much it would cost, who'd have to pay for it, where the funds would come from, would that be a better discussion to have to move the dial? Or in other words, how much does money play into getting some of our recommendations moved forward around the budgeting, around fiscal accountability and fiscal responsibility? What would you like to see from PCCEP in that discussion?
That might be a better question for Mr. King, as far as the budget piece goes.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Amy, as I was listening to you, when you're making recommendations where you think there'll be a nexus or a budget impact, I'm happy to, assist in that part of the conversation. We have, the budget office in the city, and then within the police bureau, there's fiscal services division. So we may be able to gather that information, and I do think it would aid in making a more complete recommendation with all available information for consideration for the chief and the mayor. So as those items come up, I'm happy to be of support and service to the committee to get information like that to help move the best recommendation, fully informed recommendation forward.
Yes, because I would like to take some of these ideas and run them through the behavioral health subcommittee and kind of really toss them out, work them out, analyze them out, and see what recommendations we can just move forward based on a kind of like a no cost or little cost exchange. But without going over the numbers, I don't see how we're going to accomplish that. So thank you.
Yeah,
I would
my pleasure.
welcome your help.
Yep, my pleasure.
Thank you, Amy. Ms. Ross, do you have a comment for everybody? If you can unmute yourself, then we can gain from your wisdom. At the bottom of the window, on the maybe on the bottom left side of we still can't hear you. Theo, are you able to unmute her?
I'm trying to right now.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Ross, I've asked you to unmute. I can't directly unmute your microphone, but I've asked you to unmute. If you, okay.
Okay, unfortunately, we cannot hear Barbara, but if you're able to unmute Barbara, obviously the floor will be yours. In the meantime, any other community comments or questions before we move the agenda?
I would just say that we would like to, I'll reach out to Chief, get a meeting set up with the steering committee. And I think we'll need to have regular dialogue on that so we can really be supportive of what you all are trying to do and bring changes. And I like Tabibi's idea of workshop sessions too, where we can really sit down and discuss through things in a format that's more fluid than just like, you know, back and forth kind of a deal. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Mr. King, Chief Lavelle. We appreciate the time. We know we'll be in frequent contact, and we're grateful for you taking the time tonight, so thanks. We have a 5-minute break on the agenda before moving to recommendations, unless you want to do anything differently, Lakiana.
I would keep it rolling.
You want to keep rolling?
Yeah,
fair,
people got
fair enough.
breaks, they can, but we've got 5 recommendations in an hour.
Yep. I'm with you, not against you. Okay. Barbara, you are unmuted.
Yeah, but I didn't say anything. I wasn't even close to my computer. Okay, well, this is Barbara Ross, and I was going to just say one little thing, and I'm sorry I couldn't unmute before. I was just wanting to draw attention to the fact that the special session has 6 bills related to police reform that they're going to be taking up this week, and I think that all of those are things that you have talked about before. The one that's particularly interesting to me is the one about transparency about disciplinary records, and that's House Bill 4207. And those bills will be taken up on Thursday morning and with the special committee there. So I think that for the group, it's going to be watching the implementation when these bills are passed at the state level. They will have general guidelines that will be fairly general, and then it will be up to you to be watching how they're implemented by our local mayor and the chief of police and the union representation here, how we can make those things work locally.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ms. Ross. Okay, now we will move to the recommendation portion of the agenda. As Lakiana said, we have 5 recommendations tonight, in addition to a conversation about codifying PCCEP. So we'll try to do this as quickly as possible while also allowing folks to comment. I'm putting in the chat box the link to our agenda, which links to each of the 5 recommendations. And what we've decided to do is briefly summarize each of the 5. So I'll call on the youth subcommittee, and I'll call on Elliot on his arbitration bill. And then we will discuss all 5 collectively as a PCCEP, and then we will discuss all 5 collectively as a community. So I'll start by, again, briefly describing the 3 recommendations that came out of the Settlement Agreement and Policy Subcommittee this month. Each of these recommendations was discussed at not only 2 subcommittee meetings, but one of our special Sunday meetings. And we've made a number of key changes based on feedback. So I appreciate everyone who's provided feedback so far. The first one is about accelerating the Truth and Reconciliation Commission model. For context here, the PCCEP included a Truth and Reconciliation Commission model in our recommendations to the Police Bureau regarding its community engagement plan. The Bureau accepted that recommendation and said that it would work collectively with other city bureaus to put this together, initially over a 3-year period. That's what we asked for. But it's our belief now that circumstances have changed and that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission process should be accelerated. And what we have asked for in this recommendation is for the city to stand up a working group by the end of the summer, by around Labor Day, with the hope of developing a Truth and Reconciliation Commission model that can be launched next year, calendar year 2021, instead of 3 years from now. So that's that recommendation. The second recommendation is about the duty to intervene and training to support accountability. So for those of you who don't know, a duty to intervene is a policy that has been adopted by many police departments, including the city of Portland, whereby a police officer is expected to intervene when another police officer is doing something that is either unlawful or in contravention to various police policies. What our recommendation is to make an amendment to the current duty to intervene, which in the Portland Police Bureau is known as the duty to intercede, and to not only amend that provision so that it would apply not only to unlawful conduct, but also to conduct that's prohibited by PPV policy, but also to match that with training, the likes of which has been done in places like New Orleans in particular, that stresses the fact that police officers should foster a culture of accountability within their departments or their bureaus itself. In other words, it should be a point of pride for police officers to intervene when they see one of their fellow police officers doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And that should be seen as part of what makes for good community policing. So that's the second recommendation from our subcommittee. The third recommendation is the most complex. It involves amending one of the directives that the Police Bureau has on foot pursuits. So just to give you a little context here, the Police Bureau has directives governing when police officers can, should, or should not engage in different types of pursuits of suspects. These include vehicular pursuits, car chases in public parlance, but also foot pursuits, when to actually chase someone who's suspected of having committed a crime. You can read the full recommendation, but the idea here is that the current foot pursuit directive states that foot pursuit should not be engaged if the sworn member, that is, if a police officer, believes that the danger to the police officer or the public outweighs the necessity for immediate apprehension. That's the current directive language. And we actually believe, the subcommittee believes, is that got the burden of proof backwards. That instead of assuming that a foot pursuit is reasonable and should not be engaged in only if circumstances are in a certain way, we think that the policy should be actually turned on its head and that the policy should only allow foot pursuits in certain defined circumstances, including where the failure to secure apprehension will create an imminent risk of serious bodily harm to officers, the public, or the suspect, or where the where the individual being pursued is suspected of a felony under Oregon state law. Even since we wrote this recommendation, we have seen circumstances in which deadly force has been applied to individuals who were running away from the police for nonviolent crimes. We saw this in Atlanta. And so it's our belief that by limiting the circumstances in which foot pursuit can be used, it has the potential to limit the unnecessary use of greater force in a way that has the propensity to spiral out of control. So those are the 3 recommendations from our group. I'll now turn it over to the youth subcommittee to describe their recommendation on restorative justice.
Right, and we're posting it in the chat as well right now.
Great, thanks, Taji.
Great, you want to start off?
Me? Oh, you're taking the first part.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so our restorative justice recommendation is focused on 3 sections. The first is, well, overarching, our goal is really to increase restorative justice as it exists in the city of Portland as a general, so working specifically on the police department, but also focused in the after effects of the justice system as well, as we saw it as like sort of a comprehensive understanding of restorative justice. The recommendation as a whole has 3 sections. The first section I'll be mentioning is talking about training. So we are mandating or are asking for training to be instituted for the Portland Police Bureau on a multi-year basis. The first year focused on general understanding and comprehensive idea around restorative justice and how to best utilize the second section, which Britt will mention. And then it also focused on subsequent years having community intentional partnership on any training that's developed. And then Britt will talk about the second.
Basically understanding what it looks like in the community if a restorative outcome is used versus something punitive, actually having those stories and meeting with those people. So after you go through the philosophy, which might just be taught by a trainer, making sure that you're having those meetings with the community about what that actually looks like for them. Yeah, so the second part is a platform. It's a combination of a hotline, like a phone number, as well as a website and application that young people can use for a few purposes. Number one, to request mediation or dialogue if they have a dispute or problem, or they feel like they were mistreated by an officer in a non-criminal capacity. So nothing criminally is happening, but they feel like they were misunderstood, misheard, mistreated, and they want to talk about that to restore harm, to restore trust. So that's a way for them to do it. Right now, that you can make complaints to the IPR, but that's not really something that's accessible to young people. There aren't a lot of complaints, as we learned from talking to Ross Caldwell of the IPR, and so that's a way to do that. It's also a way to request generally restorative justice type dialogue and mediation if they have other disputes in their schools or with community members, but again, in a non-criminal capacity where nothing else is happening to resolve that dispute or repair harm. So that's the platform idea that we have for section number 2.
And as it is only focused on non-criminal, we also wanted to address the criminal aspect of it. So then section 3 focuses on a coordination effort between multiple stakeholders, specifically in regards to moving towards more restorative justice models and programs of diversion when it comes to instances of criminal activity that are low crime or misdemeanors. And generally it's restorative justice, increasing restorative justice outcomes for young people in schools, in the community, and in the Justice Center as a whole. This third part is more of like sort of model of how it could be done, but we're definitely trying to work with the powers that be to make sure it can exist collaboratively. That's, yeah. Any questions?
Great. We will describe the last recommendation, then we'll take questions on any and all of these. So thank you both very much. Elliot, do you want to describe, summarize your recommendation on arbitration?
Sure. So I have put the recommendation in the chat, and this comes out of proposed legislation that Senator Lou Frederick has forwarded to the legislature. Today there was a public hearing. I gave some testimony, lots of other people gave testimony. And what it is to try to change the way that arbitration works. Currently, the arbitration law is such that police who conduct misconduct are oftentimes in charge with misconduct by the municipality. The arbitrator oftentimes overturns that. And so what the Bill 1567 introduced by Lou Frederick does is try to limit that ability of the arbitrator to overturn that. Now, Copwatch and other people have pointed out that there is a very big loophole in this bill that allows police to avoid discipline in serious cases, including deadly force, if the arbitrator does not agree with the findings of the municipality. And so today, in lots of testimony, people were suggesting that there's some standard of review that needed to be met that should be included in the bill. So that bill is currently, or what they call a concept, is currently being worked on and amended. And what this recommendation asks for is for Mayor Wheeler to use his office to lobby the Oregon State Legislature. Obviously, given this might all be wrapped up by Friday, there's not a lot of time, but other city councils, the city council from Eugene testified today in favor of these police reform proposals. And at least while I was listening, I didn't hear any representatives from the Portland City Council. So we would be asking Mayor Wheeler to use his offices to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. We will now take PCCEP questions, comments, and deliberations on any and all of these recommendations. So again, use the raise your hand feature, and just so everybody can follow along, just say at the top what recommendation you want to comment on first. Vadim, I see your hand raised, so you can kick us off.
Thank you. I first want to say it is definitely the time for the Truth and Reconciliation model to be brought up and discussed. I've been on PCCEP for about 1 year now, and even when I was attending the meetings prior to joining the committee, this was being discussed, and I have not seen much movement on that. I do think we should do our best to push that forward as quickly as possible. I think it's needed. I think it's been discussed, and I think I've heard from the community for a long time about the necessity of this. So I'm glad that's being moved forward. I do have a couple questions about the final two recommendations, the Youth Subcommittee Restorative Justice recommendation. I'm not sure if Taji or Brett want to take this, but in section 1A and D, it talks about, and I'll quote, "This shall include intentional partnership, but not limited to the community organizations listed on this recommendation." And then 1D is the PPB and City of Portland must coordinate with PCCEP and listed organizations immediately during design and throughout the entire implementation process. Not having worked on this recommendation, not having attended, I guess, the youth subcommittee meetings on this, how did these organizations get listed that specifically PPB is directed to engage when working on the restorative justice program?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think we didn't mention the process that went into creating this recommendation as for the sake of time. However, it was extensively sort of reviewed and discussed with a lot of community partners, some of which are listed, and all of the ones we reached out to are listed, and then the ones bolded are the ones that we had direct communication with beyond the initial outreach. And so PPB was mentioned because we reached out to some officers to hear about the insight from the initial procedural justice training that the Youth Service Division held just this past in-service in the winter. And you know, just understanding, like, you know, what did they like, what did they not like, did it work, all those sorts of things, so we could best put out the section 1. And so section 1 doesn't necessarily say the substance of the training, and that's not necessarily what the recommendations were supposed to do in the first place. And so we sort of just said, this is what the model should look like, and the collaborators in that process should be included. I think, I think it might have contradicted it by saying PPB in the outreach part as well, but that just meant because the officers reached out to. Apologies.
Yeah.
So all 21 organizations are listed below, and the common thread is that all of them either have a youth group or work directly with youth. So that's why we invited all of them to one of our listening sessions where we ended up editing this recommendation and working on it.
Okay, then if I can just make one recommendation as a procedural matter, I do agree, well, I'll vote on it in the future, but I do agree with the gist of this. I think though, as far as conflicts of interest go, if there are people that are sitting on PCCEP who are heads of these organizations, and we as PCCEP are telling P2B that they must coordinate with these organizations, then the people on PCCEP should at least let the public know that they are working with these organizations. That this, does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Vadim, did you have another question that you wanted to ask about arbitration before we move on?
And for the arbitration, for Elliot, I'm trying to understand what the standard review would be, because as I read these cases, it seems that if the arbitrator finds that the officer was not guilty of the charges against him, then penalty might still be imposed. And I'm not sure what the change must be in that, because let me give you some context. I am a member of a union, and I represent other employees in that union. And sometimes you have managers trying to fire people for whistleblowing actions, or just because they don't like an individual, irrespective of their work. And the arbitration is the only thing that allows people to get an outside individual to rule on management's overstepping their authority and trying to fire innocent people because of the whims of that particular manager. And so if a person is found by an arbitrator not to be guilty, I would think that the arbitrator should be allowed to discount the penalty that the managers are trying to instill. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, and actually Jason Kafori today in testimony raised that issue, or someone else raised that issue, and I think it's one to think about. The specific cases which Portland Cop Watch has pointed to include when Officer Ron Frashauer was shot and killed unarmed Aaron Campbell in 2010. In that case, the lieutenant from the training division stated that Frashauer did not act appropriately, but a sergeant under his command contradicted his testimony. And as a result of that, the arbitrator ruled there was no misconduct and overturned the discipline, and therefore overturned the firing. So the standard is a reasonable person standard. And I think if you look at the 5 or 6 cases that Portland Cop Watch has listed that are in the recommendation, any reasonable person looking at that, I think, would say that misconduct occurred. Obviously, if an arbitrator found there was absolutely no misconduct, and that it was a case like you're suggesting of someone taking out a revenge, a boss taking out a revenge on an employee, then I think that would be an appropriate point at which the arbitrator could step in. But I think a reasonable person standard would prevent these kinds of cases from resulting in no discipline for officers who've clearly violated the policy. So that's sort of a way to square the circle.
I'd be really interested to see what sort of standard that would be that would take into account both those positions, because they do involve someone making a finding that that something was reasonable or not reasonable. And I don't know who that person would be. But saying that, one more recommendation, and I've sort of alluded to this in my emails, but if we're going to reach out to Portland Cop Watch, or at least quote from their statements on pending legislation, I think we should also reach out to the Portland Police Association, at least get their take. Because as I understand it, they're not totally against this bill, but there are amendments that they would want to have, or an amendment. And I think it's only fair to reach out to them and get their take, as an organization that's supposed to bridge community engagement between the community and the police, not just the mayor's office, but and the police. I think it would benefit us to get police PPA at least input on some of these recommendations like this one. So I would have asked that it be postponed till our next meeting so we can get that PPA input, since it's not that time sensitive with respect to that second part at least.
Well, thank you for that. And at Portland Cop Watch, we didn't reach out to them. They, as you know, attend all of our meetings and are suggest to us the concerns they've had over that particular bill. We did have, as you know, you were part of the meeting with Daryl Turner, the PPA president, and he suggested that they had some clarifying language. He did not share with us the clarifying language, so there's no way for us to know what that is. And so we could ask him, but on the point of the timeliness, this is going to be voted on Thursday or Friday. So, you know, we could duck the issue and wait until it's voted on, but then I don't think we will have used our voice effectively.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Going down the list here, because I see several hands. Amy, you want to take the floor?
Yeah, thank you. Square me if I'm wrong, but I swore Lou Frederick said that the bill that's getting ready to pass, he knew would not be enough to contain the language we needed, but would give us an edge in having more discussions around improving the language. So he was kind of alluding to the fact that if we get it past where it is, we will have, everyone will have time to work on it afterwards. The other angle that I thought I kept hearing was the state people are saying they would like to find a secondary source to review the cases rather than at a local level, which I don't recall is written in this recommendation, but I swore that's what he was saying, was that we really need another party to do the reviewing in order to keep everyone kind of on a fair up and up. So I would like to see our recommendation kind of line up with what Lou Frederick was saying and some of the others, because yes, it's going to get voted on, but we always know it takes a while to get it like finalized. The other things that I really wanted to say was a couple of the recommendations sound to me like a no-brainer, and a couple of them sound like we need to do more fiscal investigating into the cost analysis of what some of our recommendations would cost to implement. Like trying to set up a commission takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of work, and it was just like setting up this commission. So I just would rather be on the side of caution in recommending that people do set up a commission right now, and we're not even offering what any of those costs would look like. So I just get nervous when we talk about recommending things without looking at the true cost analysis, because then when it fails, everyone's upset, but nobody looked at the money. So some of them I'd like to do more work on, and others I think should go right away. So that's just kind of my take on the first one, on the subject of arbitration. So does that sound like what folks remember Lou Frederick said? I think it was on Sunday at the meeting.
Well, he at the hearing today, there are 6 concepts that are being forwarded. One of them is to have the Attorney General be the office in charge of investigating police misconduct, and that is being supported by Lou Fredericks, and I think that that's a great idea. I wasn't aware of that until today, and I think that there's lots of other recommendations they made which are very pertinent. The reason why I sort of forwarded the arbitration one is because he had brought it up to us, and Portland Cop Watch, who is part of our public, had also expressed an interest in addressing it.
Thank you both. Marcia?
Yeah, I was just going to add that we talked about the arbitration bill recommendation, excuse me, at the racial equity subcommittee meeting. There were a pretty large number of community members that weren't necessarily affiliated with any community partners and just people who were curious about this committee in general. And I thought we had a lot of people in favor for that. So I just wanted to bring that to this table, that we had a lot of support for the recommendation that Elliot has written up for us.
Very good. Lakiana, and I see your hand, Andre, so we're coming to you shortly.
Thank you. Got a number of thoughts on a few bills. Let me just pull up each one. Truth and Reconciliation Committee, 100% agree. It should happen. I find the recommendation vague, so it needs some strengthening on, I believe, the goals of it. So, first of all, it says in here that we want the PPB to create a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. I don't think they should do that. I think it should be created independently, and then PPB is a member at that group, but not running it themselves.
It says we want the city to launch the working group, not the PPB.
Let me read there. I'm seeing
it in the summary up top.
Okay,
because the police bureau basically said as much. They said, yeah, we're happy to take part in this, but we don't want to be the only ones taking part. I think for the reasons you've articulated.
Okay, because yeah, in the explanation it says that we pass this recommendation that the PPB, as part of the community engagement plan, formally create a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. So I think we then maybe should clarify that, because it's saying two different things.
So yes. So when we passed the recommendation, we said PPB do it, but in their wisdom, and I think you're speaking to this now, they said we'll do this, we'll take part, but we want everybody to take part. So that next paragraph there. So pledging to work with the city and its bureaus. So yes, this is definitely a citywide process for sure.
Does it state in there what you just said? That they said that they don't think they should do it and we agree with them? Because if it's not, then we should put that in there.
In the second paragraph there, it says that they integrated into their community engagement plan, pledging to work with the city and its bureaus to effectuate a Truth and Reconciliation Committee.
So I think in there we need to be more specific and say that PCCEP recommends, just the same way it's spelled out in the it should be spelled out in the explanation. And I don't even know if the city should do it. I wrote down here my notes that the city could help fund it, but I think it should be a community effort. So I think I would like to add a piece in there that it's created by the community and not necessarily by PPB or the city. I think it should be a collaborative effort of the community.
So one more thing on that, and I'm sorry I didn't get to go through this because of time, but on page 2, the last paragraph of our explanation, we say that the PPB and the city should bring a array of diverse voices from the community. So we specifically mention some of the amicus groups involved in the lawsuit that gave birth to PCCEP, but we wouldn't limit it to that. So I think you're absolutely right, and that's what we're.
And I saw that, and I had another thought on it too, and I'll get to that in a second. But again, I'm finding the language very vague, and that just leads, to people to create it in any kind of way, or not really in the way it needs to be done. It needs to be done as a community effort. PPB and the city can be pieces of it, but I think our recommendation should spell out how we see it being done. And when we just have like, what we mean is this, but it's not actually spelled out in there, then it leaves wiggle room for nothing to happen. And while these groups are there, it also doesn't specify their roles. So I think we should say something to the effect of PCCEP recommends that the community build this Truth and Reconciliation in partnership and have PPB and the city be, members at the table, but I think that table should be built by the community. And I think it should be spelled out very clearly. Going off of that, it says PCCEP would welcome the opportunity to sit at the table. I don't think that's strong enough language either. PCCEP should sit at that table. We wouldn't welcome the opportunity. We need to be at that table. And so I just think that needs to be in there. And the second point I will add is I think we should also talk about goals of the committee or of the group. And things that I wrote down is create a historical record of events, take ownership of harm, preservation of community experiences, and a path towards rectifying past harm. So those are my recommendations to be added as kind of an amendment. And I would be happy to either write the language and throw it in the group chat or however y'all would like to do it.
Okay, yeah, happy to take language in the group chat. Again, I think in terms of goals, we recognize, and it's linked in the recommendation from 2019, that there's a lot of pieces that need to be worked out. That's what the working group is for, to like figure out, okay, how exactly is this going to function? What are the goals going to be, given the sort of model that is there? So not everything is in this short rec, but whatever you think is important to be in here, by all means, throw it in the chat, and we can put it in there for the vote later on.
Right. And again, this is just a recommendation. So even when we say what we're saying, we're just giving our input. But I think as much as we can craft what we think should happen and be ahead of it, because once everybody else throws their input and ideas in, if we've just said something like, hey, create this, but we're not giving any shape to it, I think it can be strengthened by that. So I'll throw that in there. I have comments on a couple of the other ones as well. So the duty to intervene in training to support. Okay. Obviously, I like the recommendation. The problem is at the end of the entire thing, in the detailed part of it, it says Minneapolis has a duty to intervene in place policy that was not followed. To me, that just gets to the heart of the policing issue. There's so many policies, right, that are there, and people just choose not to follow them. So we basically are just suggesting a recommendation that the bureau that killed George Floyd already had in place. And then at the end of this whole recommendation, we said that it didn't even work. So just questioning that, I mean, I would still obviously vote for it, but I question, we need to get at the heart of the issues. And then it says, PCCEP recommends that the Bureau launch an accountability training similar to the EPIC program in New Orleans. I don't know if that was explained. I see it's outlined later, but that's like the last caveat is like, hey, this is the thing that could fix that, but then it's not really spelled out. So, I mean, like, I feel like an even better recommendation would just be like, fix the discipline matrix. Like, that's the problem. We don't need more training. Like, they literally had the training in place and didn't do it. There's training so many times, chokeholds, all these things, and people aren't following them. We don't need accountability training. We need accountability. Like, people need to be held accountable when they watch someone stand on someone's neck and kill them. So I just question that. I feel like it just kind of, I don't know. Again, I welcome the policy, but I think it could be strengthened if we, first of all, add a couple sentences about what the accountability training is, but I also don't think that we almost mentioned in there that it's not going to help. Just my thoughts.
Okay. Elliot, you're next.
Wait, I still have, yeah. The youth one looks good. I would ask that a couple things. In the summary of recommendations, over the past few years, the PCCEP, NYC, and other youth groups have done extensive community engagement. Word is Bond worked specifically with NYC, so if we're going to mention them, I would appreciate if Word is Bond was mentioned in that section. As far as NYC, I think you should spell out what the acronym is and put that in there. And then that gets to my point later on when we list these 21 organizations. A lot of them are just acronyms, NARA, APANO, NEA, and I would suggest that we spell those out for people.
Will do. Sorry about that.
Yeah, my final point. I don't agree with the analysis of fiscal thoughts of these measures, because I feel that that will just be a tool to discount them, that they are not fiscally possible. We lock up people every year for nonviolent crimes, and that is very, very expensive, and nobody questions that. So if we're going to start doing fiscal analysis of anything, we should start within the Bureau first and see what is fiscally responsible on their end of things. And then PCCEP can start looking at our own recommendations and deciding what is fiscally reasonable.
I'd just like to add, I did put in the chat as well a cost analysis that we did on our recommendation specifically. So yes, I agree with what Lakiana said, and to that point, we still did our homework for it. So thank you.
Elliot, you're next, and then Andre.
Yeah, so just following along what Lakiana said about the fiscal, analysis, I think that one of our recommendations a couple of weeks ago was redirecting funds from the police bureau to alternatives to policing. This is exactly what restorative justice is about. So I think we have set up the philosophical fiscal analysis, which is take money from police, give it to these alternatives, plus the $15 million that was recently cut from the police budget. Part of that, in fact, all of that was supposed to go back to redressing violence and racism towards communities of color, Black communities in Portland. So this would be a perfect fit into that idea of redirecting that money from the police bureau to those organizations. And really, if you look at the numbers, at least in their analysis of what it costs, it's a drop in the bucket to what the police bureau budget's total budget is. So about some of the other recommendations, in general, I support all of these. I mean, I could have questions. I think I agree with Lakiana's concern about who's going to set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. On the pursuit policy, foot pursuit policy, I think it would be important to mention James Chassie there. It's kind of like if we were to have a chokehold policy and not mention George Floyd, it would just seem to be sort of missing. In the context of Portland, I think mentioning that this is a perfect example of that would help signal to the community that deals with mental health issues that we are sort of focused on those issues and aware of those issues.
Yes, and we should have mentioned, I should have mentioned Mr. Chassie from the get-go, so thank you for calling that out.
Sure, and then finally, there on the issue of, I put into the chat the measure, which is a concept LC80, which is about training that is required for the bureau. That this I think would fit under. Now I'm forgetting one of the other recommendations that I think Andrew, you were making, that it would sort of fit into the. Could you just remind me of what the three recommendations are? One is about truth and reconciliation.
Duty to intervene and the accountability training involved with that, and the foot pursuit.
Sorry, then I've got the wrong. There is a duty to intervene proposal at the state legislature, and I'll pull it up. I think it would be good to, because it is exactly on that issue, to mention it and say that we support it, because essentially it's doing the same thing requiring the same thing on a state level that we would be asking for at the city level. But I will pull that up and put it into the chat. That's it.
Thank you. Andre.
I would like to agree with Amy and respectfully disagree with Lakiana regarding the necessity of including fiscal impact, or at least having some rough discussion of it before we make these recommendations. I believe that many well-intentioned attempts at progressive reform in the past have met with failure precisely because there wasn't an attempt to engage in this discussion from the outset. And you know, those sorts of reforms ended up crashing like waves against the rocks to have no effect. And those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So, you know, I think that I want to commend Britt, Taji, and the rest of the youth subcommittee, because there's a lot of thought that went into this, into their recommendation. But, you know, just prospectively, I think it's important to have this from the get-go to make it far easier for the mayor's office to jump on board. Because as proponents of change, it's up to us to provide ease of justification for people who aren't necessarily in the room when these meetings are had to sign on. So I'll vote yes, but with the caveat that, you know, I don't know whether these recommendations will be adopted, because it requires a significant amount of effort to figure out exactly what that fiscal impact will be and where the money will come from. Will taxes be raised across Portland? If so, whom and how much? You know, the money has to come from somewhere. But these are luckily issues that we can submit to the mayor's office to determine. And then as for Elliot's recommendation regarding arbitration, I just want some clarification. Is it that, from what I read this, the bill proposes that if the arbitrator finds that the fine misconduct was legitimate, that they must accept the discipline as long as it falls within the matrix of discipline? Is that how this bill works?
Yes.
Okay, and so, you know, I saw the brief snippets of the prior decisions. Do you know why the arbitrators in those cases diverged from the Bureau's disciplinary determinations? What basis did the arbitrators make that decision based on?
Well, in the case of the Fresh Hour incident, it was because a sergeant contradicted the testimony of the lieutenant, as I understand it. I you know, have not looked into each of those cases in depth, and maybe later when the public can comment, people from Portland Cop Watch could describe in more detail what the divergence in the fact finding was. But it is troubling that in so many of these egregious cases, it seems that the arbitrator's decision could differ from that of the law enforcement agency, and therefore really no discipline happened.
So, okay, so basically the arbitrator just felt that the evidence wasn't as strong, even though they still found the same misconduct. Is that it?
Well, so in the Fresh Hour case, they instead of him being fired, he was reinstated and I think given 40 days suspension. So there was some finding of misconduct, but not at the level that the lieutenant and the Bureau had originally found.
So then the arbitrator did find that there was a lesser misconduct, and that's why there's a different. Okay.
Oh wait, Dan is saying there was no discipline at all in the Fresh Hour case. You know, I don't know, Andrew, if you want to bring them in now to answer that question. They're certainly more expert in this topic than I am.
I mean, I hold with Vadim on seeing the independence of an arbitrator as maintaining the sanctity of avoiding the collective of just maintaining the collective bargaining agreement and maintaining the power dynamics between employer and employee in such a way that, you know, could affect unions widespread all over.
That is definitely a concern raised by unions, and I think people who are talking about this at the state legislature are well aware of that. I think what we're trying to address is the egregious lack of balance in the way in which arbitrators have handled police discipline. And really, when we talk about police misconduct and discipline not functioning in this country, I think, you know, qualified immunity, as you pointed out, is one of the issues. Arbitrators and the way that they function currently is another issue. There's a role for arbitrators, but I think the balance has to be shifted so that the police can face disciplinary measures when they commit egregious acts of misconduct.
But I mean, we can go in circles on this, but just from what you're saying, though, it just sounds like the arbitrator found that the egregious act was less than what the Bureau found to be, which again is why the collective, it avoids the collective action problem by allowing the independent arbitrator to balance the scales.
In the Fresh Hour case, there was no discipline. So even though the lieutenant found this misconduct, an unarmed person was killed, he was reinstated. There was no discipline. So I think that there are other cases, but that alone should cause us concern. And I think Lou Fredericks, other people at the legislature are trying to address that while being cognizant of the real issues that you and others have raised.
Okay, thank you. I just quickly want to loop back to a comment here. Megan Bradley asked if I saw the cost analysis that Taji included regarding my earlier comment. And I heard Taji mention it, but that cost analysis was not included with the recommendation, which was posted prior to this meeting. And because that recommendation is ultimately what gets submitted to the mayor's desk, I would like to see that in future recommendations. So just that clarification.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Andre. I understand that cost matters when it comes to this. At the same time, and we did put a lot of thought into that. We did substantial research. There really is an analogous program to what we're describing, especially because, as we talked about, there's sort of three different parts. There's the training itself, there's the platform, and there's some other stuff as well we're doing. And so it's just hard to put a number on that, especially considering whether there can be sort of in-house cost to it, just moving around services that already exist when the Portland Police Bureau to make capacity for this, versus actually creating new capacity for this, if that makes sense. So like as Taji described, there was a lot of research that went into, we gave a range, but we didn't feel like we could really pin down a number on it. But the way we're doing this by, for example, having a meeting with the mayor this week, having the representative from the chief's office here this week, having a meeting with the district attorney this week, and also meeting with you throughout the process. We have all the stakeholders involved. We're going to make sure they make commitments to this. And we can figure out those numbers with some people who have a little more experience in financial regulation than myself and Taji.
Again, I want to commend both of you and the subcommittee for doing this, because this clearly shows a lot of thoughtfulness and creativity in what to do. But, just as kind of a government 101, part of what you also have to do is create a record, because after we vote here, the document you generate, the recommendation, will leave our space and go elsewhere. And, you two are both amazing youth leaders, and I just hope you take that as constructive criticism rather than anything else.
Sure, well taken. Thank you, Andre.
Any additional PCCEP comments before opening up to the rest of the group?
No, I guess I could mention there was a comment about when I had suggested that we put word as bond on the Taji's bill, and that I am a staff member for word as bond, and that is true, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I know that they did work on, that we had done work on that project, the same way that I'm asking for PCCEP to be at the table for the recommendation for the Truth and Reconciliation. I mean, there's going to be times where our work crosses over, and I would do the same for any other group that I knew was a part of any recommendation that came before PCCEP to make sure that their work is recognized.
Yeah, and Word is Bond was a main partner in putting this together. So not just even in the past with the research they did, but also in creating this, some of their youth members. So it's a good point. Thanks for bringing it up, Lakian.
Okay, we're going to move to public comment. I see Michelle, you have your hand raised if you'd like to chime in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, my name's Michelle DeShazer, and I'd like to talk about the youth restorative justice policy. I'm a retired juvenile court counselor, so I'm very familiar with how juvenile justice works. I'm really impressed with a group of young people putting this idea forward. And it looks like a lot of time and energy went into researching this. I did want to comment that, and I apologize, I did not look at this thoroughly before to have been provided this input earlier, but I noticed that the word criminal is throughout the document. In the case of the juvenile code, youth do not commit crimes. They commit violations that if they were an adult would be a crime. And I believe that it's really important that the idea of the distinctions between the juvenile code and the criminal code be well understood and sort of be peppered throughout conversations and documents about working with youth, because it really speaks to a lot of the issues that separate youth from adults, such as adolescent brain development and all those things. And the fact that the rules that apply to adults about things like expunction are very different than the rules that apply to youth. So I think it would be good to sort of wordsmith that and get that language changed. And I'd be happy to help with that if somebody would like me to. So I'll put my contact information in the chat.
Thank you for that, Michelle. I also just wanted to kind of ask a clarifying question. These sort of smaller things that, not smaller than that important, like, but I mean more of like word related things like that. Can we still vote on the recommendation and just change those things after the fact?
Oh,
we can.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's like a wordsmithing and sort of a just making sure it's consistent. But I think
absolutely,
I would not want to stop you voting on the recommendation. I know you've got plans to do some rolling out of things, and I certainly wouldn't want to interfere with that.
Yeah, in terms of process, just to jump in, the people putting forth the recommendation can say, you know, conditional on making the change that Lakiana or Michelle or whoever put forward, we're going to vote on it. So yes, we will certainly do that. Anything else, Michelle, before moving on? Thank you.
No, that should do it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Portland Cop Watch, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, hi, this is Dan Handelman again with Portland Cop Watch. So 3 of the cases that we looked at, we have the arbitration decisions, and all 3 of them that I just recently looked at reversed the decision of the city. They said that there was not misconduct. This is the Frashauer case where he killed Aaron Campbell, the Chassis case where the officers were found out of policy for failing to get Mr. Chassis to a hospital, not for beating him and breaking all his ribs and leading to his death. And they were only given 40 hours off in the first place. That was totally reversed. And in the Lieutenant Care case where he went to his sister's house, found a man sleeping outside her house in a car that she was worried about, ended up shooting and killing him. Officer Care's case, the discipline was lowered, but it wasn't because they disagreed, that they agreed there was misconduct and changed the level. They disagreed that the shooting itself was a problem because the car wasn't moving at the time, so it didn't violate that policy. There were other things that Lieutenant Care did wrong for which he got a lower discipline. So that is a very different thing than what the bill contemplates. I hope that makes sense. Like the arbitrator in that case did not lower the amount of discipline for those other things. That was the amount of discipline he would have gotten for those other actions that he did. But he was fired because of his shooting. And that because he found the arbitrator, and this is the important part about what Mr. Young was saying before, is the arbitrator in that case said, I have decided to use the standard of clear and convincing evidence. There appears to be nothing that tells arbitrators what they have to do. And we're not talking about, we support labor organizations fully, for those of you on the committee that commented about that. We're not talking about somebody who came late to work a bunch of times and the boss fired them because they don't like them. We're talking about somebody who took another human being's life. And officers are the only workers that have that ability that work within the United States and within our city. So if we carve out an exception that says, in cases that involve use of deadly force or other serious cases, when police officers are appealing their arbitration, the standard of review has to be limited. And one thing that I think Mr. Mozerski should very much appreciate is that a standard that's possible to use is the reasonable person standard. This is the standard that the Citizen Review Committee that Mr. Mozerski sits on has to use to review whether or not police officers violated policy, because the city has hamstrung them all this years with that policy. But I think it would be wise to look at that as the specific recommendation. And of course, your recommendation is fine the way it's written. It's vague, but just so you know, if you said that in those cases, the arbitrator would have to use a reasonable person standard, which means if a reasonable person, given the same evidence, could come to that finding, the arbitrator has to agree with the finding, even if they personally disagree with it. And that's how the CRC makes their findings, and I think that would be a very good thing to use for those cases. You know, again, there's lawyers and people that need to be consulted about how that would work and whether that's appropriate, but it seems like that's one possible solution.
Thank you. Barbara Baczynski, have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to comment on the duty to intervene, and I noticed a couple people in the chat made comments. I think it's important to not just have it be at the end case, a disaster is about ready to happen and you must stop it, because sometimes it's nearly impossible, or people could get hurt, innocent people could get hurt while that's happening. I hope that there's some way to tell, like leading up to a situation where officers could be trained to recognize that something, an attitude, an energy, or something is, or people doing wrong things leading up to that. Like maybe even like, why are you stopping that person in the first place? Or maybe they think certain officers kind of overly anxious and hyped up or something, you know, that they would be able, there must be some kind of, I mean, maybe it does happen out of the blue, but I suspect that there's some kind of lead up, and that officers should be free to talk about that and to find some way to deal with that before it gets almost impossible to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Additional comments, questions, suggestions from the community? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to move to vote on these. We'll take them in order. As we were saying before, and as has been our approach, we will describe what the proposed amendments are, and then vote on that amended version. So we're starting with the Truth and Reconciliation model. Again, as a reminder, this is a recommendation to accelerate the plan. Lakiana has offered the following amendment, and I would replace what is now the last paragraph of the explanation with this paragraph, which I think more clearly states the recommendation. And it reads as follows. PCCEP recommends that the city support the creation of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission working group created by community partners, including but not limited to the Albino Ministerial Alliance, Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, and the Mental Health Alliance, and including the city, the Portland Police Bureau, and the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, among other partners, as members of this committee. I'm just going to make that work group just so it's consistent. The goals of the work group should include the creation of a historical record of past events, ownership of harm inflicted by PPB to specific communities, preservation of community member experiences, and a path to rectify past harm. Okay, so that is included there, and the summary will be amended. So instead of accelerate the city's plan to launch a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it'll say accelerate the plan to launch a Portland Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and urging the city to work with the community to launch the working group this year with the hope that the commission can be launched next year. So that is the amended version of the Truth and Reconciliation.
Andrew, could you just
it was
into the chat?
Yeah, it was in the chat before, but it's easier if I just bump it. Thank you, Elliot. So here's the key paragraph, which will be at the bottom of our explanation, sort of summarizing what the recommendation is. I think we have 11 PCCEP members on here. Is that right, Theo and Claudia? So we need 6 votes tonight for approval of any of these. And so we will get started. I'm just going to run down the list. Again, this is on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission model.
To clarify, Taj and I made those changes on our recommendation to make it clear that it's working the youth system for violations, not criminal conduct.
We're voting on a different one, Britt.
What?
Yeah.
No,
so
I didn't know. Sorry, I didn't know if it's time to say that in general before we got to all of them. But
oh no, that's good. That's good. Well, we will get to that one, and you guys can say exactly what those amendments are before we.
I just didn't know if there could be time later, but yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And we just did a double check. It looks like 12 members are on, so you need 7 to pass.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, I only have 11, so I apologize for whoever I'm missing on the list, but we'll find out shortly. Okay, let's vote on this one. This is, again, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission model, and we'll start with Anne.
Yes.
Elliot?
Yes.
Andre?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Vadim?
I want to say, Andrew, thank you for all the work you put into this. And I think even though you're stepping up PCCEP and your work has been exceptional, this will be something that's going to be a real benefit to the community. And because of that, I vote yes.
Appreciate that, Vadim. Thank you. Britt?
Yes.
Taji?
Yes.
Yolanda?
Yes.
Marcia? I also vote yes. Lakiana?
Yes, sir.
Who am I missing?
Steve was on the call, but it looks like he left, so never mind.
Okay. Okay, so Truth and Reconciliation passes. The next one is duty to intervene. So we got a couple of great comments on this. So let me just bring up the amendments. So first, Elliot, you mentioned that there's it's actually a legislative council proposal, not yet bill. So what I've done here in the summary is added the following line, and I'll put it in the chat, that PCCEP supports efforts at the state level to mandate a duty to intervene policy statewide. To your point, and then Lakiana, you mentioned wanting to know more about the EPIC program in New Orleans. I have inserted the following. Here's a paragraph, and I'll just read it. The EPIC program is a peer intervention program developed by the NOPD, that's the New Orleans Police Department, in collaboration with community partners to promote a culture of high quality and ethical policing. As stated by that police department, EPIC strives to redefine police culture so that intervention to prevent or stop harmful action is not an exception to good teamwork, it is the very definition of good teamwork. And again, there's a lot more that could be written about this. That's why it's linked there in the additional resources. So those are the amendments to the duty to intervene. And unless there are any questions, we can go through voting on that one next. We'll go in the other order. So Marcia, we'll start with you.
I don't think we heard that, but I saw your microphone go off. You're muted, but we're saying a yes.
Put it in the chat. We can't hear you, Marcia.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. Yolanda.
Yes.
Taji.
Yes.
Britt.
Yes.
Vadim.
Yes.
Amy.
With one favor that you define the word peers, because in my community it means something different. That's all I'm saying. I don't want to disrespect discussion the peer specialists, and it would be good if we could just identify what the term in this document is referring to as a peer for clarity, just for the people in my community. Okay, that's all I'm asking.
Yeah, and thank you, Amy. And you mentioned that earlier to me, and I actually, you asked that the word peer be taken out because it means something specific. It was removed. It's back in there now in the last paragraph because we are I'm quoting the New Orleans Police Department, but I can take out the word peer and just describe it as an intervention program. And I think the same point gets across. So happy to do that if that makes things easier.
Yes, well, yes, Sam. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Andre?
Yes.
Elliot?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
Lakiana?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So duty to intervene passes. Moving right along here, foot pursuit. So a number of important, and I'm grateful for the suggestions on this one. Specifically, a paragraph highlighting the fact that this is not a far-fetched scenario. We have seen the tragic consequences of such chases right here in Portland, specifically James Chassie, a man who was diagnosed with a mental illness, was killed by Portland Police Bureau officers following a foot chase in September 2006. So that's a very important addition, and thank you for recommending that addition. So this is, again, amending the foot pursuit and matching the training to that. Ready for a vote again? We'll go the other direction. Anne?
Yes.
Elliot?
Yes.
Andre?
No.
Amy?
Sorry, yes.
Vadim?
Yes.
Britt?
Yes.
Taji?
Yes.
Yolanda?
Yes.
Marcia? Lakiana?
Yes.
And me, I vote yes. So foot pursuit passes. And staff, I've made the amendments. I will send you amended versions to put on the website and get to the mayor's office after the meeting. The next up is the restorative justice recommendation from the youth subcommittee. Britt or Taji, do you want to describe what amendments you've made so that the group knows what we're voting on?
Purely verbiage, same exact recommendation, just in reference to the discussion we're having around criminal versus versus juvenile circumstances that Michelle pointed out, which is really helpful. We just made that change.
And then also included workers bond in the formation of the foundational pieces and the spelling out of the acronyms for transparency's sake.
Okay. We will now vote on the youth subcommittee's recommendation. And we will start with Marcia. Yes. Yolanda.
Yes.
Taji.
No, I'm just kidding. Yes.
Good, good. Britt.
Yes.
Vadim.
I'm torn on this one. I believe in the rationale behind the recommendation, but as I mentioned earlier, there's both Taji and Britt are managing directors of Youth Educating Police, and this recommendation calls, which I think trains police in how to work with youth, and this recommendation calls specifically for the police to have to work with that organization, and so I just see that there's a conflict of interest there since no one's mentioned it or discussed it. So I'll vote yes because I agree with the tenor of it. I do think that we need to have a discussion later on about people working on nonprofits and then asking the police to specifically work with those same nonprofits that they're making recommendations for. Thank you.
Thank you, Vadim. Sounds like a good issue for the steering committee next month. Amy.
I vote yes.
Andre.
Yes.
Elliot.
Yes.
Anne.
Yes.
Lakiana.
I have a clarification on that piece. Where was it stated in there that they're working with YEP?
News again.
Is that that
It
list
is
of
one of
21?
We're not listed even as one of the main partners for putting the recommendation together.
Yeah, we already did a training. We're not pursuing any of that stuff because we
already worked with the UV on a training on our own.
We don't have restorative justice backgrounds as an organization, and we don't advertise that we do that as well. So it's not a conflict. We, as an organization, worked.
There's a lot of conflict because we're youth doing this work, which is why we're on the committee. But there's also like a lot of cross mixing with Word is Bond, Multnomah Youth Commission, people that are involved in all those organizations.
Well, from my understanding of the recommendation, it's not calling for them to ask to work with them.
It's meetings, I think, is the language, right?
Really collaboration to create the training. The training would be done initially internally, and then after the fact, it would be done with community organizations, other community organizations.
I'm still not seeing where that is spelled out.
Oh, Lakayana, it's 1.A.
Okay, 1.A.
We lose again.
Say it again. I'm looking at 1 point where? 1.A?
With, but not limited to, the community organizations listed on this recommendation. And at the bottom, it certainly lists a YEP. And then under 1D, the PBB and the City of Portland must coordinate with PCCEP and list their organizations immediately during design and throughout the entire implementation process.
Oh, Marcia says there's no conflict.
I'm misreading.
How's that a conflict of interest?
Organizations listed means, because the list is at the bottom there, that basically gives a seat at the table to all these organizations. Once again, I don't think that this is a big deal. I don't see money being, spent here or whatever, or being charged. I just think that per the conflict of interest rules that we have, if someone is working on an organization that might benefit from a policy, they should say that. That's the only point I was trying to make. If I'm misreading the list, then that's my fault.
No, I'm not a lawyer. Appreciate you bringing that up, but I just wanted to make it clear that there was no intended conflict there.
And again, let me just say something about conflicts. Conflicts are cool. Conflicts happen. Okay. The important thing about conflicts, and this is noted in our bylaws, is that they are disclosed. And we can certainly have a conversation. I think steering committee is a good place for this, about what the conflict of interest rules are for PCCEP and how we should deal with them in situations like this going forward. Because I imagine this is probably not the first or the last instance. And I think it's best to just sort of, in the interest of more disclosure, more transparency rather than less, just say if you have an affiliation with the group, and particularly if there's no financial component, we can continue right along.
Yeah, so my thoughts, I didn't realize that. I do see a slight conflict of interest, and I would like to remove word is bond from that list, if that's what the language, I thought, where it's saying how are marginalized groups or underrepresented communities, that section, and then it lists these 21 groups. I thought it was saying that here are the groups that have worked on this. I did not realize that there was a stipulation that says that they have to be consulted. And if that's the case, then I would remove word is bond from that list, because we can definitely work with it, but I don't want to create a recommendation that lists my organization as.
Yeah, you can take YEP. We'll take YEP off as well for that purpose as well.
Or why don't we make it clear that there's two lists. There are the organizations that worked on this, and there's that other part about referencing those for future work. I mean, I assume we can make that clear too, right?
Yeah, like where it says who worked on this is one thing, right? That's something, but where it's, I didn't, at the bottom when it was listed, I thought these were organizations that were just like, these are the ones that have worked on stuff. I didn't realize that there was a connection to them being like, these had to be used. And if for that part, for 1 through 21 at the bottom, I would like word is bond to be removed.
Lakayana, there's one way to deal with another way to deal with conflicts of interest, which is that in cases such as this, if you see it as a conflict of interest, one could recuse oneself from the vote. So in other words, word is bond as an organization could be there, but you could just not vote on it. You could abstain from the vote.
Yeah,
I think that deals with
so closely with them that I just feel it would just be best if we just were not just I work very closely with a lot of the folks on this group, and I just, in the interest of it, I think it would just be best, because there's going to be so many more cases where this is going to happen, and this is a very light one. Like, I'm not really even concerned, like, with it, but at the same time, it's just the principle of not even getting into that. So that's my only thing. If we could just remove word is bond from that, unless the language has changed, we're over time. So I don't think we want to start trying to go through and fix the language. It's honestly very complicated even looking there to figure out where 1A or whatever it was connected to the last of the list, which is why I didn't see it in the first place. So let's just scratch number 7, and then I vote yes. If y'all are cool with that,
Yeah, totally. I also think we could just generally change the word to consulted instead of partnered. Maybe that makes it a little more mellow.
And my reading is someone just has to say that they might have a potential conflict of interest. That's all it really takes, as long as that it's out there so the community knows that, there's people involved that might benefit from the recommendation. I don't think anything needs to be changed from my personal viewpoint, which is why I voted yes, but we're supposed to say it. So, but we could talk about it a little. I think it seems like it would pass no matter what we do at this point. So
yeah, I just want to make sure. So just to be clear, in the summary of the recommendation where it says over the past few years and then it lists organizations that worked on it, it's okay to mention word is bond there. But as far as groups that the PPB or whoever is working with, where it says word is bond number 7, we can just scratch it from there and vote yes.
Okay, I think Taj just made the change, so thank you.
Okay, Lakiana, do you want to vote?
Yeah, I voted yes.
Okay. I vote yes as well. The youth subcommittee recommendation on restorative justice passes. Thank you very much to the youth subcommittee. This is a huge body of work. I think model community engagement to a great degree. So thank you very much for all the work on that. Last but not least, arbitration. Elliot, are there any amendments to this one from feedback?
Yeah, so I just added into the chat a recommendation which goes to the last line of point 2 in the recommendations, which would read, we further recommend the use of reasonable person standard in cases of police misconduct. And that just gets to the more specificity about the kind of standard we're talking about.
Got it. Okay. We are going to start the voting on this one with Anne.
Yes.
Elliot.
Yes.
Andre.
No.
Amy.
I'm not really sure what to do, so I think I'm going to abstain.
Okay.
Yes, vote.
Vadim.
as I mentioned earlier, I think this one really deserves a lot more time than we're giving it, and I would have liked to have heard from the Portland Police Association as to what their recommendation would be for amendment, and also just general deliberation, because the standard that was just espoused is not something that I think anybody looked into other than perhaps Mr. Handelman. And certainly the public didn't get notice of this until yesterday, and Portland Police Association didn't get notice, and Portland Police Bureau did not get notice. So in that respect, for all those reasons, I wish we could vote on it next month, but if we're voting right now, no.
Thank you, Vadim. Britt?
Yes.
Thank you. Taji?
Yes.
Yolanda?
Yes.
Marcia? I vote no. Lakiana?
Yeah, so yes, I vote yes. And I will say, I think PPA needs to do, we did talk with them coming. I should have reminded them to be here tonight so that we could have got some of their input, but I also want to see PPA being engaged more in the discussions about what's going on and having their positions ready on certain things like this. We're at a time right now where things are moving, and they need to be more a part of these discussions. And yeah, I think we can work out technical details of it later, but in support of fixing binding arbitration. I mean, like at the end of the day, people are dying, people are getting rehired. It's extremely impacting it. We can't get caught up in the technical pieces of like what, like, yes, 100%.
Thank you. So the vote on the arbitration recommendation passes by a vote of 7-3. 3 with 1 abstention. Thank you very much to all the committees. I'll remind just youth subcommittee and Elliot, if you can get the revised versions, the approved, voted on versions to the staff, then we can make sure that they get off to City Hall appropriately.
Yeah, I believe we already sent ours over. Thank you, Andrew.
Lightning fast, as always. Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, we are over time. Lakiana, I don't know if you want to bump codifying PCCEP to the next meeting or what.
Yeah, I'll read them real quick. We don't have to vote on it, but basically City Council or the Mayor's office reached out, wants to codify PCCEP. It's not currently written into City Code. It's held within, what is that word I'm looking for? The PCCEP settlement agreement. So they asked for some recommendations on what we would like to see, and here they are. PCCEP select its own members. We currently are selected by the mayor. I think if we want to be a truly independent body with community input, that we select our own members. PCCEP have a role in engaging community members to review new cohorts of officers. So I'm thinking like anytime there's a new cohort coming in, that PCCEP set up a community group that interacts with them, engages with them, and kind of gives some kind of input on if they should be hired or not. PCCEP have a role in hiring all top-level command staff, including the police chief, assistant, and deputy chiefs. Anytime we have someone new, we should be a part of that. If someone leaves before they're just reappointed to someone else, that PCCEP should have a say in that. PCCEP have a spot at the negotiating table as a community representative for contract negotiations. PCCEP be embedded in the universal review process for all PPP recommendations that impact the community. Currently, there's 2 universal reviews, but this would then add a third piece in there where any recommendation that impacts the community would then have to come before PCCEP as well. So it would just kind of further get that process out there in the community and wouldn't force PCCEP to go track down recommendations or seek them out. They would automatically come to us. Clarify and strengthen language around PPP's responsibility to consider recommendations. This goes to a lot of people's comments, like we crank out recommendations and then the PPP reviews them and just does whatever. Like what is their responsibility to actually take these on? How does that process look? Compel officer testimony in situations like officer discipline, which goes to number 8. PCCEP have the power in disciplining officers, some power in that. I don't exactly know what that would look like, but that would be part of it. By the way, if someone could, I don't know if someone has, because I'm looking at my screen right now, but drop the link to this. It's on the PCCEP website, although I did have trouble finding it. So if someone wants to drop it in there. And then number 9, as you can see, we have an incredibly talented group of individuals. We've had 9 meetings a month, so I'm in favor of increasing the PCCEP stipend from $120 a month to $500.
These are all things that are require lots of discussion, so I move we set this aside to the next.
I'm not saying we go on this. This would take, yes, more time than we have tonight. Just wanted to make sure that since we have it together, we should at least read them off.
Thank you. And I imagine there'll be opportunity for discussion. I know there's certainly folks have thoughts on a number of these, but do you want to bring it up again next month? Do you want to bring it up at steering? How do you want people to track?
Yeah, we'll start with steering and we'll put on the agenda for next month too.
Okay. Very good. Robert King mentioned earlier that we have 2 resignations. Steve Trujillo, who wasn't here tonight, but is unable to continue just given the enormous amount of demands on his plate, particularly serving his capacity as a faith leader in the community. Steve was a great asset to this committee, and he'll certainly be missed. The other guy, I don't know if he'll be missed very much. That's me. I'm moving to the city of Eugene, and I will miss being part of this group. It was an honor to serve with each of you, and an honor to be part of a group that brought together so many people in the community. And I particularly want to shout out the groups that got us here and the people who have shown up week after week, month after month to share your wisdom and thoughts with us. It really means a lot. The idea that the citizens of the great riches of a city, you certainly prove that every day. And so I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity. And I'll miss all of you. So peace.
Yeah, I can just follow up with that. Just want to thank you, Andrew, for your hard work. I believe you are the last, beyond me, the original member on the committee, you know, been dedicated since day one and just brought an incredible wealth of knowledge to the group. And just want to wish you the best on your next endeavors. It also just highlights, you know, the work that we do. And, you know, the turnover we're seeing, like nobody's leaving this committee because they're disgruntled, right? You know, like up until the last second, we're out here working, busting our tails for that. And I think you're just a perfect example of that. And I want people to remember that when we start looking at turnover statistics, right, of who's leaving the committee, that, you know, no one's leaving because of any other reason other than life happens. So wish you the best, Andrew, and thank you for all your support and hard work on this committee over the years.
Thank you.
Are we going to be voting on alternates to add on at our next general meeting? How does that process work for you?
Yeah, that'll be at the next month's public meeting. I was just typing it in the chat box for some folks, but you all, PCCEP members, will be voting on an alternate to appoint to the full body, on 2 alternates to appoint to the full body.
And Andrew, I just want to reiterate what I said earlier. It's been a pleasure working with you. I think you've had an even-handed, level-headed approach to everything. People don't realize how much work it takes to chair any committee, and my hat's off to all the chair people on this board, but particularly the Settlement and Policy Committee. Will miss your guidance tremendously, and I'll miss you as a co-worker in this venture. And Steve is out there as well. So, I'm sure I'll see Steve again, but he's an asset, and thanks to all the work that you've done.
Thank you. Okay, that is a wrap for the June PCCEP meeting. Be on the lookout on the PCCEP website and our social media for next month's meetings. They'll be here before you know it. Have a good night and Godspeed.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you all.
Night.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Andrew.
Andrew.
Peace and love, Andrew.
Peace.
Goodbye, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting for everyone.
Peace.